Hey there, Jim Rohn here. Let's talk about something that you probably won't hear from your avoidant ex, but that doesn't make it any less true. If you've ever been in a relationship with someone emotionally avoidant, you know the cycle. You give your heart, your presence, your patience. You try to be understanding. You hold space hoping that one day they'll let their guard down. And in return, you're met with distance, mixed signals, shutdowns, and eventually silence. Maybe they left suddenly. Maybe they pulled away slowly. Either way, you were left questioning yourself. Did I ask for too much? Was I too emotional? Did they even care? But here's the truth. They'll probably never say out loud they're going to regret losing you. In today's video, I'm walking you through the 5 things avoidant exes regret the most. Not always right away, but when the dust settles and they're finally alone with their thoughts. We'll dive into what they remember, what they miss, and what they often realize too late. Not to feed your ego, but to give you clarity. Because sometimes healing starts with knowing that your love wasn't wasted. It just wasn't received by someone who was emotionally ready for it. This video is for anyone who gave their all in a relationship that couldn't hold it. If you've been wondering whether your absence is felt, this one's for you. So before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. I post weekly content to help you move forward from confusing relationships with more clarity, peace, and self-worth. Let's talk about what they'll regret and why you're the one who'll walk away stronger. Let's start with the first thing your avoidant ex is likely to regret the most: your unconditional love. Here's what's important to understand. Avoidants often struggle to fully receive love, especially the kind that asks nothing in return. When someone shows up for them emotionally, consistently, and without judgment, it can feel both comforting and threatening. That closeness activates old fears of losing control, of being vulnerable, of having to depend on someone. So instead of leaning in, they pull back. They push you away, not because they don't care, but because caring too much feels overwhelming. But here's where the regret creeps in after you're gone. At first, they may act unaffected, distant, disconnected, maybe even relieved. But with time and space, many avoidants begin to feel the absence of the very thing they once dismissed: your presence, your patience, your emotional generosity. They start to remember the quiet ways you loved them, the texts just to check in, the way you didn't demand they be anyone but themselves, the way you offered them safety even when they couldn't offer it back. And here's the thing, they thought that kind of love would be easy to find again. But they learn often the hard way that it's not. The world isn't full of people willing to hold space the way you did. That realization stings, and it plants a seed of regret. Take Jen, for example. Her avoidant ex ended things abruptly, saying he just wasn't ready. Months later, he reached out admitting he missed the way she made him feel calm and understood. But by then, Jen had already started her healing. She had moved on from offering love that went unappreciated. That's the power of unconditional love. It's rare, And when they lose it, they feel it, even if they never say it out loud. The second thing your avoidant ex is likely to regret, perhaps more than they even know how to admit, is the emotional safety you provided. You may not have realized it at the time, but you created a rare kind of space for them. A space where they could let their guard down, even if only a little. A space where they weren't judged for being quiet, inconsistent, or emotionally complicated. You didn't pressure them to be someone they weren't. You didn't demand perfection. What you wanted was real connection, gentle, honest, mutual connection. And even though they may have struggled to fully step into it, they felt that safety. Deep down, they knew they could be more of themselves with you than they had in most other relationships. But here's the thing about avoidance: they often don't recognize the value of emotional safety until they've lost it. Because for someone with a dismissive, avoidant attachment style, emotional closeness feels confusing. It's something they long for, but simultaneously feel threatened by. So when you offered them calmness, understanding, and space to express, without pushing, without shaming, they didn't know how to hold it. Instead, they often pulled away, sometimes subtly, sometimes suddenly. And in doing so, they walked away from the very thing they needed most. It's only after the relationship ends, after the dust settles and the noise quiets, that they start to notice what's missing. Not the surface level things, but the feeling you gave them, the way you made it okay to feel, the way you stayed steady even when they got distant. And they realize that not everyone will give that. Not everyone will have the patience to weather the emotional push-pull. Most people won't try to understand their inner world. They'll just walk away when it gets hard. Take Alex, for example. His ex, Kayla, was avoidant and often distanced herself during vulnerable moments. Kayla would emotionally freeze after deep conversations or intimacy, but Alex didn't shame her for that. He'd check in gently, offer space, but also reassurance. After they broke up, because she needed time to figure herself out, Kayla spent months dating casually. But eventually, she reached out and admitted, "No one's made me feel as safe as you did. I didn't realize how rare that was." But by then, Alex had moved on. He had learned he deserved emotional reciprocity, not just moments of safety, but a partner willing to meet him there too. That's the thing about emotional safety. It's invisible when it's there, but undeniable once it's gone. Your avoidant ex may not have had the tools to recognize or hold on to the sanctuary you built, but in time, they'll feel the absence of it. Because love without safety isn't love that lasts. And when they look back, they'll remember the one person who offered them peace. Not because you needed to fix them, but because you simply wanted to know them. And that kind of space is unforgettable. The third thing avoidant exes often regret once they have distance from the relationship is that they never truly let themselves be seen. Not fully expressing themselves becomes a quiet but lingering source of pain for many avoidantly attached individuals, even if they never admit it out loud. In the relationship, they likely struggled with vulnerability. Moments that called for emotional openness, sharing fears, needs, longings, felt too exposed, too risky. Instead of leaning in, they may have stayed guarded. They kept things light, surface level, or intellectual, not because they didn't feel deeply, but because they didn't know how to share those feelings in a way that felt safe. Vulnerability to an avoidant often feels like a loss of control, and control is their shield. It's the way they manage the inner chaos of past wounds they haven't yet healed. But here's what happens after you're gone. They begin to notice the emotional spaces they never stepped into, the conversations they avoided, the truths they swallowed, the moments where they could have let you in but didn't. And that realization begins to weigh on them. There's regret not just for losing you, but for never giving themselves a chance to experience the depth of connection they secretly craved. Avoidants often want intimacy as much as anyone else, but their internal wiring tells them it's dangerous. So they hold back. They say less than they feel. They convince themselves they're better off detached. But after the relationship ends, especially when the emotional dust starts to settle, they begin to feel the emptiness that comes with never really showing up. And they realize they didn't just lose someone, they lost the opportunity to truly be known. That regret is quiet but powerful. It's not about wishing they had performed better or said the right things. It's about the recognition that they were emotionally absent in moments where presence could have changed everything. They'll carry the memory of those missed chances. And even if they go on to other relationships, there's often a part of them that remembers the version of themselves they held back and the connection they could have had if they'd only let themselves speak, feel, or stay open. This kind of regret doesn't always lead to immediate change, because expressing emotions isn't something avoidance can flip on like a switch. It takes deep work, intention, and the willingness to stay with discomfort. But over time, it becomes one of the clearest markers of growth the moment they realize they lost something, not because of what you lacked, but because of what they withheld. And that internal reckoning, that's not about you chasing validation. That's about you knowing you were ready for depth and they weren't. You showed up. They stayed hidden. And eventually, they'll feel the weight of all the words they never said. The fourth regret that tends to hit avoidant exes, though, often long after you've walked away, is the realization that they believed you'd always be there. See, one of the patterns that plays out in relationships with dismissive avoidance is this illusion of permanence. Not necessarily commitment in the traditional sense, but an unspoken belief that no matter how many times they withdrew, you would stay. No matter how inconsistent, closed off, or emotionally unavailable they became, you would keep trying, keep loving, keep waiting. And, to be fair, for a while, you probably did. Because you were patient, you were steady, you gave the benefit of the doubt, you understood their wounds, and you thought, if I just love them well enough, long enough, gently enough, they'll eventually feel safe enough to stay. So you showed up again and again, even when it hurt, even when your needs were going unmet. You stayed longer than most people would, and they noticed, even if they never said so. But avoidants often mistake patience for permanence. Your emotional consistency gets taken for granted. They assume you'll always be there because you always have been. So when you finally stop reaching out, when you set a boundary, or when you choose to walk away, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, it shakes them. It shatters the illusion of control they thought they had over the dynamic. They're not used to someone like you choosing themselves. And the truth is, they never really believed you would. That moment when you don't answer the message, when you don't try to fix it, when you stop showing up in the way you always have, is when the regret sets in. Not immediately, of course. Often avoidants don't process the full emotional weight of a relationship loss until later. But when they do, the regret is heavy, because now they see that your love wasn't endless, it was generous. And generosity shouldn't be confused with obligation. You gave without demands, but not without limits. You were loyal, not blind. And eventually you chose peace over pursuit. That's when they realize they assumed wrong. They assumed you'd always be available, always emotionally invested, always ready to forgive and forget. And now they understand that real love can't be taken for granted. This regret is different than the others. It's not just about losing you. It's about waking up to the consequences of their emotional distance. It's the shock of learning that even the most loving hearts will eventually protect themselves. And when they look back, they'll remember the day you stopped chasing, the day your silence spoke louder than any argument. The day they learned that love is not about who holds on the longest, it's about who shows up fully. And in that silence, they'll feel the cost of believing you'd never leave, because now they know you were always there until you weren't. The fifth and often most painful regret for a dismissive avoidant ex comes when they finally see what their unhealed patterns cost them. It's the regret of not doing the work sooner, not facing their emotional wounds until it was too late, until they had already lost someone who truly loved them. That someone was you. Avoidants typically move through life avoiding not just people, but their own feelings. They compartmentalize pain. They shut down when things get hard. They convince themselves that they're fine alone, and that needing someone or being needed is a threat, not a gift. But underneath that, there's usually a storm of unprocessed experiences, childhood emotional neglect, past relationship trauma, the deep belief that closeness equals danger. And as long as no one gets too close, they don't have to confront it. But when someone like you comes along, someone who sees through the walls, who loves them with patience and presence, they're faced with something unfamiliar, the chance to be known. And for a while, they try to maintain control. They keep their distance test, your commitment, maybe even push you away. And still, you show up. Until one day you don't. You finally walk. You stop making excuses. You stop waiting for change. And that moment becomes the turning point they never expected but deeply feel. Suddenly, the person who gave them the safest chance to grow is gone. And for the first time, they aren't just left alone, they're left with the truth. The truth that their fear of vulnerability cost them a real connection. The truth that their silence pushed away someone who only ever wanted to love them. The truth that healing should have happened long before you had to leave. This regret goes deeper than missing you. It becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, they're forced to see what they've avoided for years, their part in the pattern, the people they've hurt, the love they never allowed themselves to fully receive, and the self-sabotage that finally caught up with them. It's often only after that wake-up call that some avoidants begin the real work. Therapy, reflection, slowing down, and sitting with what they once ran from. But by then, it's not about getting you back, it's about finally acknowledging what they never had the courage to face while they still had you. You weren't their therapist. You weren't their lesson. You were a partner, one who showed up with love, consistency, and emotional maturity. And their regret, while real, doesn't mean you were meant to stay and wait for them to evolve. It means they had a chance, and they weren't ready. So if you ever wonder whether they'll regret losing you, the answer is yes. But the regret that matters most isn't just about losing you, it's about losing the version of themselves they could have become if they had chosen healing while you were still there. And that realization, it doesn't undo the ending, but it changes them forever. If you've ever loved a dismissive avoidant and been left wondering whether they even noticed what they walked away from, let this be your reminder they will feel the loss. Not always right away, not always in words, but in time and often in silence, they'll come to regret the very things they once overlooked. They'll regret your unconditional love. They'll regret the emotional safety you gave. They'll regret not opening up when they had the chance. They'll regret assuming you'd always stay. And most of all, they'll regret not healing sooner until it cost them you. But here's the most important part. Their regret is not your responsibility. You showed up. You loved them with patience, presence, and depth. You offered them what many people spend their lives hoping to find: real connection. If they couldn't receive it, if they ran from it, if they let you go, it was never because you were too much. It was because they weren't ready to meet love with the same emotional maturity you brought to the table. Your healing starts the moment you stop internalizing their avoidance as a reflection of your value. You are not here to convince someone to stay. You are here to experience a love that feels mutual, safe, and emotionally present. The kind of love where you don't have to overthink, overfunction, or explain your worth. Thank you so much for watching this video. If it brought you any sense of peace, clarity, or validation, I truly appreciate you being here. I invite you to subscribe to the channel for more weekly insights on healing attachment dynamics and emotionally mature love. And if you feel comfortable, drop a comment below. Have you experienced this kind of regret from an avoidant ex? What helped you heal? Your story might be the very thing someone else needs to hear today. Until next time, protect your peace, honor your heart, and never forget you deserve a love that stays.